every single day is a gift and opportunity to live.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 45 of Strokecast. Meet the Stromies. Angie Jorgensen, Sarah Conaway, and Tamsen Butler are the Stromies, the Stroke Homies. Clever, huh? They are three stroke survivors brought together by this life-threatening event that many of us went through. They started a blog to share their stories back in February of 2018, just earlier this year. It started simply, and other survivors started following them and reading them. And then other survivors started to share their stories. Dozens and dozens of survivors are now featured on the blog, supporting their own recoveries by sharing their experiences and empowering readers looking to make a connection. The Stromie energy is a force, and it's just getting started. I connected with the Stromies from my home office in Seattle while they met up at a coffee shop in Omaha, Nebraska. Sometimes it still amazes me that technology allows things like this to happen, and that then I can share that conversation with all of you. Stromie Sarah is a busy mom and speaker. A survivor of both stroke and lupus, her amazing recovery story provides hope for others. Stromie Tamsen is a mom, a certified fitness instructor, and an award-winning author. Her massive stroke at age 41 was unexpected and life-changing. Stromie Angie is also a mom and certified fitness instructor. In 2012, she was in a coma, suffered a stroke, and found out she had a rare kind of cancer called a name that she will pronounce later in this episode. Her amazing recovery continues to inspire the people around her. So now, let's go for a cup of coffee and meet the Stromies. Welcome to the Strokecast, Stromies. I'm so thrilled you could join me this morning. I really love the energy you seem to bring to everything.
Thanks. Woo!
Let's start with that general opening conversation that most stroke survivors seem to have with one another. What is your stroke story?
Good questions.
Okay, so my name is Sarah Conaway. I'm 37 years old. I was a successful businesswoman pre-stroke. I worked a ton of hours. I had a little one, a 3-year-old, and those two things, work and my daughter family, really consumed my life. And let's see, February of 2016, I had 2 strokes. My story begins with...
So with 2 of them, you were overachieving from the very beginning.
Yes, that's kind of been my MO my whole life. So I always like to one-up you, so I had to. So my husband's granddad passed away, and he flew to North Carolina for the funeral. And my then 3-year-old daughter, she's now 6, was up crying for like 6 hours, just inconsolable with an earache. I was like, something is super wrong with my daughter. So I took her to Children's Hospital to the emergency room. And as soon as we sit down to fill out the paperwork, I suddenly just lose complete feeling on the right side of my body. And I was really dizzy, confused. I had no idea what was going on. So they take me back at Children's, get me all hooked up, and take me next door to Methodist Hospital, which I'd never been to before. They even had my name spelled wrong on my wristband because I'm Conaway, and they had Conway. And yeah, never been to this hospital before. And it's divine intervention that I was there because I was on blood thinners at the time, and it was a very scary situation, one that they hadn't faced before. So time was of the essence. And the spoiler alert is my daughter actually had nothing wrong with her that night. She was fine once we arrived, but her earache may have saved my life.
Wow. Like somehow she sensed that needed to get to the hospital, but just had no idea that it wasn't her.
Yes. It was just crazy because I would have been asleep at 3 a.m, and I had an ischemic stroke on February 6th, followed by a hemorrhagic conversion 3 days later on February 9th. And I'd have a shot of Kcentra, which is a clotting agent to stop the bleeding in my brain. So for 2 weeks, I was a sitting duck in the hospital. It was kind of the doctors talked to my husband and made that decision. He said he remembers he got the call when he was at swim lessons with our daughter, and they were like, we really don't know what to do. We can give her the shot of Kcentra, but it's going to make her very susceptible to more clotting, obviously, but the bleeding has to stop in her brain. So we're kind of don't know what to do. And so he authorized the Kcentra. Thankfully, it worked, stopped the bleeding in my brain. And I was there inpatient for 5 weeks, just relearning activities of daily living that we often take for granted, which I definitely don't take for granted anymore. Every single day is a gift and opportunity to live. And I am so fortunate not only to have more days, but also to have met the Stromies and other stroke survivors, who share my thankfulness just for life. We just don't take anything for granted anymore, and I just feel truly blessed to be here. So thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
What I really like that you mentioned there is the idea we talk about, the idea of living more or having more years. I really like the way you break it down and just say the idea to just have more days.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a nice concrete way of looking at it.
Yeah. Thank you. Especially with the little one at home, it's an absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary. So I feel very blessed.
This is Tamsen. I'm going to go next because I always go after Angie, and her story is so fantastic. I always feel like a buzzkill when I tell my story. Okay.
It's pretty amazing.
So for me, I was 41, fitness instructor, super healthy, and just one day I had a massive stroke. My kids were with me. I had just gone to the grocery store, and I got super dizzy putting the groceries away, and all of a sudden I'm on the ground, and my daughter is freaking out, obviously, because I'm not one to just take to the ground at any time. So she kept saying she wanted to call my husband because he works about 9 minutes away from our house. And I kept telling her not to call him because I didn't want him to see me in that state, which I know is stupid. By the way, anybody listening to this, if you think you're having a stroke, for the love of God, please call 911. So anyhow, finally she convinced me that she was going to call him. So she called him. He came home. He tried to lift me up, and my left side totally gave out. And at that point, everybody in the room, we all knew. We were like, oh, this is a stroke, okay? And so he calls an ambulance. They come. They take me to the hospital, and then he authorized TPA for me, which I think really is why I don't have such severe disabilities, because the TPA broke up that blood clot. Mine was an ischemic stroke, caused by, which I later found out was caused by, I had some holes in my heart. And I also have a genetic mutation that makes my blood clot a little more than usual. So, all these things were happening in my body, and I had no idea. And I guess in hindsight, it's better that it happened then. During the summer when my kids were at home and they could call and get help, I wasn't, on an airplane or home alone while my husband was deployed with little toddlers or something, So if I had to have a stroke, that was a really good time to have it. So anyhow, prior to stroke, I was an author and a fitness instructor, and both those things swiftly got taken away from me. I couldn't really form the words to write anymore, and my body wouldn't allow me to do physical stuff so well. But after I relearned how to write and relearned how to walk, I just got right back into everything. I forced myself on my old editors. I was like, please let me write for you again. And I had some very patient editors that allowed me to start writing for them. And just like anything, it's a practice makes perfect type situation. So I've essentially reclaimed my life for the most part. I just walk around a lot more confused than I used to. So anyhow, that's my story.
It's interesting how, you hear that whole idea of not wanting your daughter to call for help. It's one of those things where when we're having a major brain attack, it's almost like we're not making the best decisions in that moment.
Oh, that's so true.
And that's one of those things that's really interesting to think about, is how everything that we're doing, our entire perceptions of the world around us and the decisions we make, it's all coming out of that brain that is right then and there in various states of dying and just not necessarily working at its best.
Yeah, and nowadays, whenever my daughter, because she's a teenager now and she's very willful, as most teenagers are, I can't even be mad about it because I'm like, save my life.
Never forget that picture of the image of her standing over you.
Yeah, that's part of the story that I neglected to say, is that at one point when I was lying on the ground, she was standing over me with her hands on her hips, and she was yelling at me that I was not okay, I was not all right, and she was going to call Daddy. I was like, okay, go ahead, I guess.
That's the other refrain I hear a lot, is that a lot of the survivors that I talk with often mention that I was lucky in that these things worked out the way they did, because it could have been so much worse than it was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all three of us have that in our stories. And just, hold on to your hat for Angie's story, because hers is wild.
It was a wild ride, yes, and a twist of events. But the best part, I look at every time the three of us get together, I'm so grateful, because they came at such a time that was honestly really pretty therapeutic for me as well. I know Tamsen, when we met, just for me to sit with another stroke survivor and just have somebody get me in an instant, and and then Sarah on top of it. It was pretty cool. I'll tell you more about that when I wrap up. Okay, my name is Angie Jorgensen. And I'm not going to reveal my age, except that I'm older than Sarah and Tamsen.
And fabulous.
I'm the queen of the age group, I guess. Anyway, but I'm 50-something. And I actually also, I work as a sales director. I have taught fitness classes. I've run marathons through the years. Healthy lifestyle. And, we have, my husband and I, we have 4 great children together, and life is it's busy like it is for everybody, but I've always kind of lived and thought every day was a gift. And, you take an experience like this and it just multiplies it by 10, really, or 1,000 for that matter. For me, I woke up the morning of, I had not been feeling great all week, but I woke up in the morning on December 7th. So tomorrow is my 6-year stroke anniversary.
Yay! Well, congratulations on still being here. That is awesome.
No, yes, I do not take that for granted.
Just wait.
But I woke up in the morning and felt honestly like I had the worst flu I'd ever had. The kids went out the door to go to school, and then literally moments later, I was thunder and lightning were going through my chest, and I was fighting to breathe. I went into the bathroom and thought I was going to be sick. I sank down to the floor where honestly I probably would have stayed. My husband was supposed to be out of town on a hunting trip. And the night before at midnight, his friend texted him and said, the direction of the wind has changed. Let's just call it off this one time. So my husband happened to be there. So I give him credit for saving my life first, because had he not been there, I just don't think I would have called 911 for myself, or maybe I would have, I don't even know if I would have gotten far enough to do that. Anyway, he did come into the bathroom to check on me, and I said the words, help me, and then hospital. And the next thing I know, we were off to the hospital. We got stuck in morning rush hour traffic on the way to Lakeside Hospital here in Omaha. And he ended up driving in the ditch around morning rush hour traffic to get me there. I was really crashing. I got there. They took me straight back to a room. They started running tests right away, and they could tell there was something was really wrong, but they couldn't pinpoint it. A short time later, I coded twice, once for 15 minutes, and again before they brought me back with CPR. And at that point, I had 5% heart life, and they told my family, say goodbye to her. She's not going to make it. My family did say goodbye to me. They life flighted me to Nebraska Medicine for higher care. At that point, I had they hooked me up to a machine called ECMO, which is kind of for last-ditch hopeless cases. It's a machine that does the work of your heart and your lungs. Basically, it kind of puts a dead person on hold while they try to figure out what's wrong with you, or mostly dead, as they say in The Princess Bride.
Mostly dead.
It's only mostly dead. But my organs had shut down. I had had at least one stroke with blood pressure documented of over 300 over 155 in a medical journal. Got kind of a mess. And I spent a week in a coma, hooked up to this machine, and they were running all kinds of tests. Initially, they thought it was a heart virus. My husband signed to put me on a heart transplant list if that would save my life. After about a week, though, so this happened on December 7th. So a few days later, they did notice my heart got like 5% better, and then 10% better. And on December 12th, 2012, so on 12/12/12, my heart ended up coming back fully functional. And it was at that time the doctors were like, oh my gosh, she does not have a heart virus. Well, amidst all the tests they had done all week, on a CT scan, they had noticed that I also had a tumor on my adrenal gland. Your adrenals are what produce epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline. That tumor had spiked my adrenaline to over 500 times the level your body should have, which was like a lightning strike to my heart. It's a very rare condition. In fact, they said about half of them they find in autopsy. For even the hospital at that time to get a situation that went as far as mine, they don't really live. In fact, I've had an interesting time tracking people down who have been through that. Anyway, I did wake up a couple days later. They had prepared my family because I had gone to that extreme blood pressure more than once, that when I woke up, I might not even know who I was, yet alone any of them. I woke up on the 14th, not in a little bit of a hot mess, but the first thing in asking me questions, one of the things I asked for was a cookie. And my family said, oh my God, that is exactly what she would say. We know she's going to be okay. I did wake up a total invalid. I couldn't use my hands. I couldn't walk. I could barely talk. When people were kind of letting me know some of the process that I had been through during the week, honestly, my very first thoughts, Bill, were, thank you, God. I get to go to my daughter's graduation, and this has to be some kind of miracle. The medical staff, I had incredible medical care, but they too said, there is so much of this we can't explain, but we are enjoying the cool ride of it. It was day by day, and it was honestly rebuilding my health from square zero. But I look at the countless blessings that have come from this journey. They prepared me for what my life would look like after heart failure, after being gone for 15 minutes. And it's interesting because now to this day, I am actually on no meds of any kind.
Wow.
I have gone back to instructing classes. I have gone back to my life before and then some in a crazy way, but it has produced countless opportunities to pay it forward, even getting additionally certified as a health coach, and just honestly the gift every day that we all have to pay it forward and to just be grateful and to express that. To be able, for one day, I had heard Tamsen speak at a Heart Association Go Red event. And when I heard her speak, I thought, I have to be friends with that woman. And I invited her to coffee, and literally from that point, we had a great connection almost from the first words.
She loves me.
I do.
And I also found Tamsen online, an article she'd written, and I was like, yes, I'm going to find her, and she's going to be my friend. So both Angie and I really didn't give Tamsen much choice. We forced her to be our friend.
Yes. And it's been a great journey.
Yes, absolutely.
And to be able to, we thought, if we can take our events similar but also very different and put them together and maybe make it a helpful way to inspire somebody else, we're thrilled to pieces.
You know, the more I do this project and talk about my story and talk with other survivors about their stories, the more I hear from other folks that, wow, it's just so helpful to them to just hear what other folks are going through, to connect, if not in person, even if it's just virtually, with what's going on. The idea that, you know, you said earlier that it's folks who get you. And when we go to the stroke support group that I work with and introduce new members and say, you know, you're in a place where folks just get it. It is such a visible relief for folks to start to make those connections.
Yeah, I agree. This is Tamsen. Sarah and we've met up with some local stroke survivors, and it's just been amazing. We'll start out just having, you know, regular conversation and stuff, and then one of us will mention something like, man, I'm scatterbrained, or, you know, I have a hard time doing this or that. And you just, all of a sudden, the look of recognition in the person's eyes, and they're like, that's from the stroke. That's from the stroke, you know, and then it kind of gives them permission to be who they are now. And, you know, that's a really cool gift to give to somebody.
This is Stromie Sarah, by the way. I had the opportunity to meet up with a nurse who worked in the hospital. She's a stroke nurse. And she took care of me when I came into the hospital and remembered me, and actually had a brainstem stroke herself 2 months after she took care of me. And I got to meet her and am in touch with her. And it's just such a cool experience that we've had to meet stroke survivors all over, and especially those that live here locally.
It's amazing. I think in our minds, we think of when somebody has a stroke, I think initially you kind of think of, oh, well, maybe they were 80.
Yeah.
But we were so surprised across the world how many people, 20s, 30s, 40s.
And Sarah, 12.
Sarah, in town, 12-year-old girl who had a stroke, and just how common it is, too.
And we feel like us getting our story out helps people that are in our similar situation, because we've all said that when we were recovering, we were really eager to hear stories from people like us who went through similar things and then got their lives back. Because, you know, as you're laying there in the hospital bed and you can't move a whole side and you can't think, it's like you want somebody to be like, you know what, I was there and I'm okay now and I've got my life back. I'm, you know, doing this and that. Maybe we don't get our lives back completely, but we get a life back, and that's pretty great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It definitely takes that every day as a gift and expands it. And you know, you're right. The little things, like I remember being in the hospital trying to coordinate my fingers to hit the right keys on my iPad, and how many hours and how frustrating. But then what was more powerful was the number of hours I spent trying to get my hands to work, period, to open them, to even get them to do anything. And, you know, it could have gone so different. The pilots that flew me to the second hospital actually came to see me while I was in the hospital, because they had been looking for my name in the obituaries all week. Apparently they follow up on their flights. And when my name was not appearing there, they came to see me and they said, we transported a dead woman. We're in shock. And I guess I look back and I remember that, because I think if I ever have a day where I feel flustered, or like we've kind of mentioned, the crazy part is the things you forget. But it's one thing to forget something and not know you did. But when you do and you're a little frustrated by that, I have to stop and remember things like that, and just the bigger picture of it. And I think even through each other and through others, we can impact. Gosh, if we can help, it's everything.
And I think all three of us are really good at just unashamedly telling our story. I had a lot of issues with like my mental health afterwards, because you may have this too, Bill, because I think yours was in the basal ganglia as well. Yes. And that's where anxiety disorders are housed. So my anxiety was just through the roof and stuff, and it just made life really difficult. And so for me to be able to go out there and say, like, look, if you're feeling super anxious or you're feeling depressed or whatever, you have brain damage. It's okay. Give yourself a break. Talk to somebody, you know. For me to go out there and do that, it gives people permission to be like, you know what, maybe this is just a product of what happened to me. Because I think a lot of stroke survivors, they might be like, I feel depressed, but maybe it's because of what happened to me. But I mean, in one sense it is, but it's not a reaction to the situation. It's a reaction to the damage to your brain. And once you realize that, you're like, okay, I can work with this. Let's get the help I need.
I learn something every time I'm with these two.
Oh.
Seriously, just the anxiety push. I'm like, oh my gosh, that puts together a piece for me.
Yeah.
It never ends.
That's why we need each other, baby.
And like I say, you're still you're still learning from one another after all this time of working together. So you've built this bond, and you've built this, not to minimize it, but the idea of this brand of the Stromies, this way of talking about what you do. Did that personal bond and connection and idea come about by itself and then turn into the blog and all of the social media efforts, or was the blog and the outreach part of your plan from when you initially met and got together?
I think the evolution of our story begins with us meeting and becoming friends and realizing that there was something special about 3 stroke survivors who could hang out with each other and understand each other. And then at one point I was like, hey guys, we should write a book together, because before my stroke I was an author. So, before all that happened, I was pretty well versed in that process. And so then we said, well, we're going to write a book, but first we need to, expose the Stromies to the world. So let's start a blog. So then we did the blog, and then it just kind of took on a life of its own. And I mean, we're a global presence now. And I don't know if the book's ever going to get written.
But maybe it's not meant, this is Sarah, maybe it's not meant to be right now. When we started the blog, we started sharing our stories, and then to be able to meet other people, I started reaching out to stroke survivors and asking if they would be interested in sharing their story with us. And over time, people just started sending us stories and asking to be featured on our blog, which was really, really cool. And they get as much out of sharing their stories as we do and as the readers do, because a lot of them, they're sharing them for the very first time. And we've been able to pair up people who have very rare, clotting disorders. We found one gal who had the same chromocytoma that Angie did, the tumor on her adrenal gland, involved in her stroke story, and just really rare things that people would never have the opportunity to have met and connected on that level before. So we feel very honored to be a part of their journey, and we're so glad to have them as a part of ours.
I think what's also really interesting too about people having the opportunity to share their stories. Ultimately, for pre-stroke even, I was, my entire theory behind social media was, because I'm arrogant enough to have a theory that drives all of social media, but was that people just want to be heard. And I think especially post-stroke, the folks that many people are talking with, their family and their close friends, they don't necessarily want to hear the story anymore because, well, they've heard bits and pieces of it, and in some cases it's old news, and in other cases it terrifies them because they almost lost their loved one, and they don't necessarily want to revisit that and listen to that story again. And having an outlet to share it with the broader world becomes, just that much more important.
I think that's huge what you said about, family members or even friends having that fear from what happened with their loved one. And I think that's something that the folks we've met, the other stroke survivors, have shared with us, is that they've lost a lot of friends along the way, and that it's hurt them and confused them. And the fact that we're able to be their new friends and friends on a different level that connect through these traumatic experiences, we connect on a level that you just simply can't put into words. It's a bond that is simply unbreakable. And we feel very blessed to be able to fill that void, not only in each other's lives, but in those that we're meeting globally.
You can't see, but I'm nodding furiously right now.
I can't see on my blind side too, so I can't see either.
I'm doing this the whole time you're talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't you? Yeah. Everybody's got something. And I think, you take your mess and you make it your message. Some people, I don't know. I think we don't even know why something happens a lot of the time, but we can use it to make ourselves better and even more importantly, impact somebody else positively. Yeah. Then it's all good. Therapeutic too, for that matter.
Oh yeah.
So what are some of the most memorable stories that folks have shared with you?
Gosh,
so many.
We have one that comes to my mind. We shared a story of a stroke survivor that had a stroke on her first day of life. Oh. So she was simply 1 day old. Another one, we have a friend here in town, Barb, who had a stroke when she was 28 weeks pregnant. So those two are ones that stick out to me.
There was one, and I don't remember who this was, so maybe you'll remember.
Yeah.
But it was somebody that had a stroke as a result of a drug interaction. Like he took illicit drugs and had a stroke. And it's like, that really struck me because they always tell you the stroke wasn't your fault. There was nothing you could have done. But for him, it was different because they could pinpoint you had the stroke because of something you did, something you weren't supposed to be doing. And that one really struck me that had to be super hard to get over.
Yeah, he was vaping.
Was he vaping?
Yeah, and we've had several that have shared through that, and it's interesting to see their lives unfold, their faith journey develop, and just this new character, new version of themselves because they're so happy and excited to have another chance at life that they simply don't take it for granted. They stopped doing drugs, started going to church. It's just really, really neat to see that evolution.
Yeah.
The other thing I wonder now, too, is you've had this experience that has really brought you all together. Had you met without having had the strokes, whether at a conference, at a book event, at a coffee shop, do you think you would have formed this bond of friendship?
I have no doubt we would have been friends, but I don't know that we would have became this trio of, positivity and stuff. Because, the other day, Sarah put a picture of herself up from when she was, a teenager or something? And she's wearing this 9 Inch Nails shirt. And I was like, I had that exact 9 Inch Nails shirt back in the 90s.
But you were on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast.
Yeah, and it's funny because we have a lot in common in that sense.
Yeah, I would have had a Sean Cassidy t-shirt on in my teens, just saying. 9 Inch Nails was not hot yet. but that's such a good point. I have no doubt we would have been friends. But this gave almost an unspoken, just absolute extra bond and strength. And I always say, when you have that day, especially to a stroke survivor, some days are tougher.
Yeah.
And maybe even right now with all the extra added things with the holidays, but just to smile, take a deep breath, and not let it overwhelm you. I think that you kind of mentioned something about hacks earlier. I think honestly one of the best hacks, if you will, is your mindset and being able to just take a deep breath, calm, not beat yourself up, and just maybe allow yourself to just breathe. Just be for a moment and not get overwhelmed by all the things that are happening and maybe all the things that you used to be able to do that are just a little different now.
I think we talk about the power of neuroplasticity a lot, but the thing is neuroplasticity is not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a neutral thing, and it's happening all the time to all of us, whether we're stroke survivors or not. It's just that, it's what your brain is going to wire itself to do more of in the future, and your mindset points it in that direction.
Yeah, Bill, I always thought of neuroplasticity as opportunity, honestly. Because I'm like, you never know what connections are going to be made when. It was just like a month or two ago, I woke up from a nap, and I guess I really needed this nap. But when I woke up from the nap, suddenly I could independently move the left side of my mouth, which I hadn't been able to do since my stroke. Like I could smile on both sides, but I couldn't just make my left side move. But for whatever reason, after I woke up from that nap, there it was. And it made no sense, but, you never know when those connections are going to be made.
Well, and the things that get better over time. Sometimes I know we've all seen and especially have noticed in each other where we were earlier on in the process. I know that when we were at coffee with Sarah, coffee with Sarah the one day, and she was definitely the freshest off her stroke and really was dealing with some aphasia things. And Tamsen and I both observed how much better that has gotten over time. Not to mention just little things that we have noticed. And so maybe not getting caught up in what isn't going so well today, or the numbness or the forgetfulness or whatever the obstacle, but knowing that, 6 months from now, this might just be even a little bit better.
Yeah. And anybody who says that stroke recovery ends at 1 year is full of it. Don't believe it, because it keeps going. I'm over 3 years out and I still see improvements frequently.
That is, again, one of the things I hear from more and more stroke survivors is that, a year, 2 years, 5 years out, 8 years out, still seeing improvements and still having that growth and still having things come back, or the brain just starting to work better. It's, if you keep doing the work, you've got that chance to continue recovering in this new life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it sounds cliche, but just don't give up is basically the message, right? Yeah.
And keep feeding your mind good stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Just put good stuff in there every day. Something, maybe it's reading something positive. Maybe it's just listening to something positive. But, what you put in comes out. Kind of sounds cliche too, but hey.
We are full of cliches today.
Well, to add into those cliches, it's been said that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And
then I am fabulous.
That's right. That's right. You are. Oh, I love it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's about, you got to give your brain what it needs and surround yourself with the energy and the hope and the expectation that you can improve in whatever direction improvement means for you. Tamsen, I believe you were involved with the American Heart Association, right?
Yeah, the year after my stroke, they asked me to deliver the message at the Go Red for Women Expo. Mm-hmm. And so after that, I became a pretty strong advocate for the Heart Association.
How did you connect with them to begin with?
Well, I wrote a piece about stroke recovery because, when you're a writer and you're trying to write again, you write. So I wrote a piece, and a friend of mine who has a publication printed it online for me. And I guess they found that, and then they reached out to me, asked me to coffee, and we had coffee, and they said, "Do you think you might like to be the keynote speaker?" And I said, "Why, yes, I would." Before I thought about, I'm going to be speaking to a room full of 800 people, and I have aphasia, but whatever, And it was such a empowering experience to go from like that stroke victim to like the stroke advocate. It was very cathartic, for sure.
In fact, we've all had the privilege of getting to help the American Heart Association and even the Stroke Foundation with different projects. And that's kind of one of the things that linked all of us. Actually, I was there at that event, but had been found by them earlier on because of an article that a magazine did on my health story. And so it's interesting how it all kind of weaved in, and we've all had the privilege of just being able to really pay it forward through that incredible foundation, really.
I mean, when we think about it, we kind of owe them because all the technology and the research they've done has touched us in one way or another in our survival.
Yeah, it brought us together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've had the privilege of getting to work with the Puget Sound chapter of the American Heart Association for a couple of things, and it's just been a lot of great folks that I've met through there. So if other folks feel compelled to share their story or to work with groups like the American Heart Association or their own country's equivalent organization, where should they start? What should they do?
Well, the Heart Association reached out to us initially, so I'm not sure what it's like if you reach out to them, but I'd imagine they'd be really receptive. If, you contact them, you say, "Hey, listen, I'm a stroke survivor and I'm ready to tell my story." They might just put you on their roster and call you up and say, "Hey, we need somebody for this interview," or something like that. I think that's a great place to start. And if not, they probably have the resources to help you.
I've actually paired, this is Stromie Sarah. I've had that question from several of our followers and have been able to help them search for a local chapter and get them connected. So that's been pretty cool because it's something that I often hear them say, oh, I never even thought about that, or I didn't know that the American Heart Association and the American Stroke Association were linked. Didn't even know there was an American Stroke Association. And so I think that the education piece has been a huge thing that we've been able to provide people with.
And of course, if folks wanted to share their story with you, do you have a way of submitting that story to you, or should they just...
They can reach us on our website at stromies.com or on our social media. Our Facebook is Stromies, Facebook /Stromies, or however that goes. And then what's our Twitter? 3 Stromies, I think.
Yeah, at 3 Stromies. And then Instagram is at 3_Stromies. And then, they can also just email us. We all have email addresses, Sarah, Tamsen, or Angie at stromies.com.
Yeah, and if you send that, one of the 3 of us is going to get it. So you're only going to be talking to us. We don't have any administrative assistance or anything.
And very important to note, I'm not sure if this was mentioned, but Stromies is Stroke Homies put together, Stromies, which Tamsen's husband so wonderfully thought of. And so that's how that came about.
And what's really awesome about that is that it seems like it was very easy for you to get the URL stromies.com. And if you search for Stromies through the search engine of your choice, there's not a whole lot of other stuff that comes up.
It's kind of a weird word. So it worked out well.
I know. When I say it, sometimes people give me that look. I'm like, Stroke Homies. Immediately they get it.
Yeah, people love the idea.
Well, and it kind of makes them smile. And I figure, hey, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And of course, all those links will also be available at strokecast.com/Stromies.
Thanks, Bill. We do want to hear from people. So.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we always enjoy it.
And that brings us to our hack of the week.
One that I would share, because this was actually very helpful to me when I was in the hospital. I still had a lot of things going wrong before they really started to go right. In fact, I almost coded again when I was awake. And I remember at that point, it was a reality check that I really didn't have much control. And so I thought, okay, just find one good thing. Amidst everything that's happening today, even if it feels like a lot is not going my way, I'm going to find one good thing and build on that. And even today, sometimes if I feel like I get a little overwhelmed with too many details that I have let myself come across, I have to just, all right, what's one thing right now? What's one thing? So if that's helpful to somebody at any point in their journey.
And I'll share a visualization that I use a lot still today. And that's about neural pathways and clearing those neural pathways. So what I visualize is a cornfield and a deer trying to run to the center of the cornfield. And when you're trying to get that neural pathway, they have to go through that cornfield. And it takes a while, and they're stumbling, and they're pushing, But then the next time they go, it's a little easier because the path is a little more clear. And then the next time they go, they just shoot right to the center of that cornfield. So for me, I think about that as my brain restructuring. So anytime I try to do something, like say I'm trying to do something with dexterity with my left hand, which I have a really hard time with, if it's slow, I just visualize this deer. It's just stumbling over the corn. It's trying to get to the center of the cornfield. And someday it'll just shoot right there, hopefully.
She's our author.
Yeah.
So well said.
And further establishing that the Stromies are, in fact, based in Nebraska.
I know, Tamsen's sign. She's an Army brat.
I am not from Nebraska. I'm from Southern California. So the fact that I am saying analogies that are very Nebraskan just appalls me.
Oh, big red, baby.
Well, that is fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Just keep your head up. Keep going. Smile. Know that there's other people out there, certainly us, cheering you on in your journey. And we'd love to hear your story. Your story might just add strength to someone else's story.
That's true. There's power in sharing your story.
Yeah.
And we want to share people's stories. We want to connect people and help people to realize they are not alone. None of us are alone. It feels like it a lot of the time. But it's like there's so many of us out there.
Yeah. We look forward to meeting you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, now I have a great excuse to go to Nebraska again.
I will take you to the cornfields, Bill.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. So, Sarah, Tamsen, and Angie, thank you so much for joining us this week. This has been fantastic. I really love what you're doing.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
This was a fun episode. Well, really, most of the ones that I have are fun because I do enjoy doing this. But it's great to connect with these ladies through their blog and through the work that they're doing to share that here. A lot of us are driven by some of the same forces to share our story, to connect with other folks, to let other folks out there know that they are not alone, know that there is power in hearing other stories and power in sharing their own. So check out Stromies.com to learn more about the Stromies and read the amazing stories of survival, recovery, and thriving. Connect with one or more of the Stromies via social media or email and share your story. You can find all those links over at strokecast.com/Stromies. Share this episode with someone you think might appreciate the Stromie story by giving them the link, strokecast.com/Stromies. Be sure to visualize a cornfield as part of your recovery to help your brain engage in the neuroplastic process it needs to drive new neural pathways. Find one good thing every day, whether you've had a stroke or not. And of course, as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.